This soup cost more than your worthless life, so clean it off my shoes, my ex, Leonardo, yelled. A second later, burning cream soup splashed across my face and soaked my waitress apron while hundreds of guests laughed around me. It was his wedding day. The same man who abandoned me the moment he found out I was pregnant was now marrying an oligarch's daughter. "Get on your knees and apologize to my fiancé," he snapped before shoving me hard between the shoulders. I crashed onto broken porcelain as people pulled out their phones to record everything. Then they threw me out the back door barefoot like I was garbage. Leonardo thought he had humiliated some poor waitress. What he didn't know was that 1 hour earlier, I had secretly bought every debt connected to his future father-in-law. I'm the anonymous investor known as Angel X, and before the night was over, their wedding would become the downfall of their empire. "Watch it, idiot! Your dirty hands almost touched my dress!" The bride's sharp voice echoed through the elegant Grand Opera ballroom. I stood frozen, gripping the silver tray so tightly my hands hurt. The air smelled of lilies and expensive perfume, but all I felt was suffocation. Standing in front of me was Leonardo, the man I once loved more than anything. He looked perfect in his expensive tuxedo, wearing a watch worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. But behind his polished appearance, I saw the same cold cruelty hiding in his eyes. It was hard to believe this was the same man who once shared cheap noodles with me in our tiny apartment while we dreamed about a better future. Beside him stood Beatrice, wrapped in diamonds and lace, the spoiled heiress of the Alvarez oil empire. And tonight, humiliating me had become her favorite entertainment. "Wasn't throwing you out of our apartment enough?" Leonardo whispered near my ear, the smell of expensive cognac heavy on his breath. "Did you really come here just to watch me become king of this city?" "I'm only here to do my job, Leonardo." "I'm just doing my job, Leonardo," I answered, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. My jaw hurt from trying to stay calm, while anger burned inside me. I couldn't tell him the truth yet, not until he fully enjoyed his victory, before everything he built collapsed in front of him. "Your job is to stay invisible beneath me, not stand in front of my guests," he snapped angrily. Then he grabbed a bowl of hot pumpkin soup off my tray. "This soup is worth more than your pathetic life, so clean my shoes with it." Before I could move, the burning soup hit my face. I shut my eyes instantly as the thick liquid ran over my skin, down my neck, and into the collar of my cheap uniform. For a brief second, the ballroom went completely quiet. Then hundreds of rich guests burst into cruel laughter. "Oh my God, look at her!" Camilla, the bride's best friend, laughed while pointing her manicured finger at me. She already had her phone raised, recording everything. "Post this online. Caption it. Leonardo's ex now serves soup for a living." "Get on your knees," Leonardo shouted, shoving me hard by the shoulder. "Apologize to my wife for ruining our night with your miserable face." Another rough push hit my back, and my knees slammed into the marble floor, straight onto broken pieces of porcelain. Sharp pain shot through my legs immediately. I felt warm blood soaking through my pants, but I stayed silent. I just stared at his polished leather shoes stained with drops of orange soup. "Security!" Leonardo yelled. "Throw this trash out before she ruins the whole hall with her smell." Then he looked at me with disgust. "Take her shoes too? Someone like her doesn't deserve to walk on this marble floor." 2 guards in black suits grabbed my arms without mercy. One of them tore my cheap ballet flats off my feet while grinning like it was funny. Barefoot, they dragged me across the luxurious ballroom, past spilled wine and expensive food scattered across the floor. I could still hear the rich guests laughing behind me, while dozens of phones stayed pointed in my direction. Then, the heavy kitchen doors slammed shut with a loud metallic bang, and the guards shoved me into the freezing rain outside. I stood there in a puddle, barely able to breathe. Cold rain washed the soup from my face, along with the tears I finally stopped holding back. My bare feet froze against the wet asphalt, and my soaked uniform clung to my skin like ice. But deep inside me, something much hotter was burning, enough to destroy every person inside that hotel. Leonardo thought tonight was his greatest victory. He believed marrying Beatrice would save his company, LeoCorp, which had secretly been drowning in debt for over a year. What he didn't know was that earlier that morning, Beatrice's father, the untouchable oligarch Alvarez, had signed over every asset he owned to Angel X in exchange for wiping out his debts. And Angel X was me. My hands trembled as I pulled a sealed waterproof package from inside my apron. Hidden inside was my real phone, an encrypted satellite device. The screen lit up immediately with a message from my chief attorney. Transfer completed. You are now the sole owner of all collateral assets tied to the Alvarez family and Ritchie Industries. Awaiting authorization to proceed. A slow smile spread across my swollen lips. I pressed speed dial. Arthur, bring the Rolls-Royce to the main entrance. Then I added calmly, lock every exit and prepare my white Armani suit. It's time these fake kings remember who really controls their world. I looked up at the glowing ballroom windows above me. The music was louder now. The party was still going. Leonardo, you wanted me on my knees so badly. Enjoy your last few minutes of victory. Because very soon, you'll be the one begging me for mercy. Only 10 minutes remained before the waitress they humiliated returned with a bill none of them could ever afford to pay. Behind the massive metal doors of the Grand Opera, I could still hear laughter, music, and loud cheers. Inside, Leonardo was probably giving his first toast as the newest member of the powerful Alvarez family. He thought he had thrown away worthless trash. What he didn't understand was that he had just thrown away the person capable of destroying his entire life. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up silently beside the puddle where I stood in the rain. Arthur stepped out immediately. He was my head of security and the only person who had known my real identity back when Angel X existed as nothing more than a hidden name inside Swiss banking systems. The second he saw my bruised face and split lip, his expression turned dark with anger. Madam Alina, they went too far. His hand moved toward the weapon hidden under his jacket. Give me the order, and I'll clear that ballroom myself. No, Arthur, I answered quietly. That would be too easy. I want them to watch everything fall apart piece by piece. I climbed into the warm leather interior of the car. Waiting for me inside was a white Armani suit and a diamond hairpin neatly placed in a velvet case. As we drove toward the hotel's main entrance, I opened my tablet and activated the global freeze system. Marcus, are you there? I asked. Yes, madam, came the calm voice of my financial director calling from Zurich. All LeoCorp and Alvarez holding assets are now under our control. Technically, they're already bankrupt. We're ready to shut down every credit line. Do it, I said coldly. Empty every account during the wedding dinner. I looked out the window at the glowing hotel lights. I want Alvarez to discover that his daughter just married a bankrupt man and that he doesn't even own this hotel anymore. A few minutes later, the Rolls-Royce stopped at the grand staircase. The doorman hurried to open my door and bowed respectfully. Funny enough, he was the same man who ignored me earlier while security dragged me barefoot through the rain. Now, he didn't even recognize me as the waitress they humiliated less than an hour ago. I walked through the lobby just as the wedding celebration reached its highest point. At the center of the ballroom, Leonardo and Beatrice stood beside a massive wedding cake worth thousands of dollars, getting ready to cut the first slice together. I walked straight past the guards, and none of them dared stop me. Something in my expression made them freeze where they stood. Then suddenly, the music died completely. The sound system shut off exactly as planned. I stopped at the entrance of the ballroom. Once again, hundreds of eyes turned toward me. But this time, nobody was laughing. The room filled with nervous whispers instead. Security! Leonardo yelled, throwing the cake knife onto the table. I told you to get this crazy woman out of here. Then he pointed at me furiously. How dare you come back? I kept walking toward the stage while the crowd slowly moved aside for me. The sound of my heels echoed across the silent ballroom like a warning before disaster. Leonardo, I said calmly, my voice carrying through hidden microphones across the hall, you claimed that soup was worth more than my life. I wonder how much your life is worth now that your company owes mine 2 billion euros. Suddenly, the giant wedding screens turned bright red. The romantic photos disappeared, replaced by real financial documents showing LeoCorp's debt reports. Dad, what is happening? Beatrice cried in panic, grabbing her father's arm. Make her stop. But Alvarez didn't answer. He stood frozen, staring at the message on his phone. All accounts frozen by order of Angel X. The color vanished from his face immediately. I stepped onto the stage and stopped inches away from Leonardo. You thought Beatrice would save you? I asked quietly. No, Leo. She was the reason you lost everything. All these years, you tried stealing my ideas while forgetting one important detail. I smiled coldly. I owned the patents the entire time. At this exact moment, police are already confiscating your company's servers. Then I turned toward Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez, your corporation officially became my property 30 minutes ago because of unpaid debts. This wedding, this cake, the wine, even the flowers. I paid for all of it. I slowly looked around the ballroom. And now the party is over. Then I leaned closer to Leonardo, who looked completely shattered. Remember when you forced me onto my knees to apologize? I nodded toward the guests holding their phones up. They're not recording me anymore, Leonardo. They're recording the collapse of your empire. Court officers suddenly rushed into the ballroom. Leonardo Ricci, you are under arrest for financial fraud and document forgery, one officer announced in a cold, official voice. Leonardo just stared at me in shock, unable to say a single word. Next to him, Beatrice tore the veil off her head the second she realized she had just married a bankrupt man. I calmly picked up the untouched glass of champagne he never got the chance to drink. Go ahead and apologize now, Leo, I said quietly. The difference is, this time I won't be listening. Only an hour earlier, the Grand Opera Ballroom had looked like paradise. Now the entire place felt like chaos and ruin. The waiters stood frozen with trays in their hands, unsure whether they should keep serving drinks or just watch the destruction happening in front of them. Beatrice remained near the wedding cake, completely falling apart. Her expensive veil was tangled in the decorations, and cake cream stained her designer dress. For the first time all night, she looked exactly how I had looked earlier, humiliated and broken. Except she didn't have my strength. "Dad, do something!" she screamed hysterically. "Throw this psycho out!" Alvarez finally stepped forward, trying to take control again. His face turned red with anger, and his fists tightened so hard his knuckles turned white. "Listen carefully," he growled as he moved closer to me. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running or where you got those fake papers, but if you don't take back every word right now, you won't leave this building alive. This is my hotel. Where the hell is my security?" "Your security staff already received termination notices," I answered calmly without breaking eye contact. "Their contracts ended the moment your accounts became insolvent." Then I gave him a small smile. "And about the hotel, check your email. 15 minutes ago, the Grand Opera officially became property of Angel X because of debts you failed to pay." I slowly glanced around the ballroom. "So right now, Mr. Alvarez, you're just another guest standing in my building." Then I looked back at Leonardo. 2 police officers stood beside him, while he backed himself against the edge of the stage. His perfect appearance was gone now. His hair was messy, panic filled his eyes, and he desperately searched the room for help from the same powerful people who had admired him only minutes earlier. Those powerful friends of Leonardo's were already backing away from him. The same business sharks who had praised him earlier were now trying to stay out of camera range beside a ruined man. "Leo, remember when you wanted me on my knees apologizing to you?" I moved closer, while Beatrice suddenly tried to attack me and grab my hair, but Arthur's men stopped her immediately. "Look at your hands," I said quietly to Leonardo. "They're shaking. Not because you're cold, because you finally understand the truth. Everything you built using my ideas and my work was fake from the start." Arthur handed me a folder, and I pulled out a document. "This is the official seizure order for every asset connected to Ricci Industries," I announced. "That includes the expensive watch you loved showing off and the ring you just put on Beatrice's finger." I gave a faint smile. "And for the record, that ring was bought with money stolen from my investment fund." The police officers exchanged a quick look. Then one of them walked straight toward Beatrice and pulled the massive diamond ring off her finger while she screamed hysterically. "No, that ring is mine!" she cried as she dropped onto the marble floor, the exact same floor where I had been forced onto my knees earlier. "It was never yours, Beatrice," I answered coldly. "It's evidence." Near the ballroom exit, I noticed Camilla trying to sneak away through the staff door. Earlier, she had happily filmed my humiliation for social media. Now, she hid her face behind her designer handbag. "Camilla," I called out. She froze instantly. "You wanted content for your blog so badly, remember?" I smiled slightly. "Why stop filming now? This is the most interesting part." Then I added, "And that new Porsche Leo bought you last week? It's currently being repossessed outside." Her entire face went pale. "That car was connected to the same credit line I just shut down." Her phone slipped from her trembling hand and shattered against the marble floor. In one moment, she understood everything was gone. The car, the status, the rich friends pretending they didn't know her anymore. Then I looked back at Alvarez. The old oligarch had collapsed heavily into a chair, struggling to breathe. The empire he spent his whole life building had fallen apart in less than an hour because of one terrible mistake. He let his future son-in-law humiliate a woman whose name he never even cared to learn. I picked up the microphone one last time. The celebration is over, ladies and gentlemen. Waiters, you're free to leave. And for surviving this nightmare tonight, every employee here will receive a bonus equal to a full year's salary. Then I stepped closer to the stage edge and watched the officers lead Leonardo away in handcuffs. "Do you remember what you told me while I stood barefoot in the rain?" I asked quietly. "You said I was nobody." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Now you're finally going to understand what being nobody really feels like." I paused for a second. "The only difference is that no Rolls-Royce will be waiting for you outside. Only a prison transport van." Then I turned around and walked toward the exit. My heels echoed through the silent ballroom that had been full of laughter and arrogance only minutes earlier. Arthur opened the doors for me, and together we stepped into the cold night rain. But now, the rain no longer felt cruel. It felt clean. As the limousine drove away, I looked back through the window at the glowing Grand Opera sign. A second later, the lights shut off completely. My revenge had been cold and calculated, but the empire I destroyed that night had been built on lies from the beginning. And I didn't regret any of it. A few weeks later, courtroom 402 greeted me with silence, fluorescent lights, and the smell of old paper mixed with antiseptic. There were no crystal chandeliers here, no luxury, just harsh white lighting that exposed every exhausted line on Leonardo's face. He sat at the defendant's table wearing a cheap gray suit from the detention center. His skin looked pale, and the man who once obsessed over perfection now looked completely broken. Beside him sat Alvarez, nervously biting his lips. The powerful oligarch no longer looked dangerous. He looked like an old man crushed by reality, still hoping for a miracle that would never come. Beatrice wasn't there. Rumors said she had sold the last designer bag she owned and disappeared to stay with distant relatives, somewhere far outside the city. "All rise! Court is now in session," the bailiff announced loudly. I stood from my seat in the front row. I wore a perfectly tailored dark blue suit made by one of the best designers in Milan. I didn't look directly at Leonardo, but I could feel his eyes locked on me the entire time, full of anger, regret, jealousy, and desperation. The court will now hear the case of Angel X Fund versus Ritchie Industries and the Alvarez Group on charges of fraud, forgery, and money laundering, the judge announced in a dry voice. "The plaintiff may proceed." I stood and walked toward the podium. The sound of my heels echoed sharply through the silent courtroom. "Your Honor," I began calmly, "for the past 10 years, Leonardo Ritchie has been stealing intellectual property that legally belonged to my client. He used trust, personal relationships, and manipulation to gain access to patents that later became the foundation of his business empire." I placed several files onto the podium. "We are submitting encrypted source codes and digital signatures stored on the Nemesis server years before Leonardo registered his first company." Leonardo's attorney immediately jumped to his feet. "Objection!" he snapped. "These are only accusations from an angry former partner. There's no direct proof that Ms. Elena created those systems." A faint smile crossed my face. This was exactly the moment I had prepared for. "Your Honor," I said smoothly, "I request permission to add documents from the State Registry of Special Subjects into evidence." I paused briefly before continuing. "These documents confirm that Elena is not simply a personal name. It's the acronym for a classified government financial security program, a program that I personally designed." A stunned silence spread across the courtroom. I slowly turned toward Leonardo. "He didn't just betray his partner," I said coldly. "He stole government-level technology while hiding behind my identity." The entire room went still. Leonardo gripped the table so tightly his hands turned white. I watched the realization hit him all at once. I had never been his assistant. I had been the person above him the entire time, the woman who allowed him to play the role of businessman until greed finally destroyed him. "And there's more," I continued while turning toward Alvarez. We are also submitting recorded conversations where Mr. Alvarez discussed eliminating the waitress who embarrassed his family at the wedding. Alvarez collapsed back into his chair, looking completely defeated. Even his own lawyer lowered his eyes. The case was already over. For the next hour, the judge carefully reviewed the evidence while the courtroom sat in heavy silence that seemed to last forever. When the judge finally raised his eyes from the documents, I already knew the decision before he spoke. This court finds Leonardo Ricci and the Alvarez Group guilty on all charges. The sentence is 15 years in prison with full confiscation of assets in favor of the injured party. Effective immediately. The second the bailiff stepped toward Leonardo with handcuffs, he lost control. "Elena, you can't do this to me," he shouted desperately. "I loved you. We built everything together." I walked toward him slowly while reporters pushed against each other trying to get closer. "You never loved me, Leo," I said calmly. "You loved the power you thought you had because I allowed you to feel important." I stopped in front of him. "Remember the soup you threw in my face?" A cold smile crossed my lips. "Now you'll spend the next 15 years eating prison food from a metal bowl? And every time you pick up that spoon, you'll remember exactly how this all started." Without another word, I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, dozens of reporters waited on the courthouse steps. "Ms. Elena, what are you planning to do with the seized assets?" they shouted from every direction. I paused for a moment, put on my sunglasses, and looked up at the sunlight finally breaking through the clouds. "I created a foundation for women who suffer from financial and emotional abuse," I answered. "Every dollar taken from LeoCorp will be used to help women men like Leonardo tried to destroy." Once inside the car, Arthur handed me the morning newspaper. My photo covered the front page beneath a giant headline. "Angel of Vengeance, the woman who destroyed an empire built on lies." I quietly folded the paper and set it aside, because this was not the end of my story. There was still one final chapter left. The chapter where I would stop hiding in the shadows and finally become the woman I was always meant to be.